let me do these short stories, just to better understand these characters. Because that was work that I didn't do for the screenplay. The Folly of Youth, like I was so, like egotistical and like full of myself. But I think that was like kind of a good thing. The best stories just really beat the crap out of their characters, because you need to beat them down over and over and over again so their rise, in the third act can be that much more sweet.
How soon after your father told you about the idea of sin eating did you know this was going to become a movie?
Oh, I mean, kind of right away, a little bit, because I was like, it was so sticky to me. Because based on the previous films that I've done, I've always liked to make movies and stories about like the haves and the have-nots, and the disparate nature of power, when it comes to money, with people who have it and people who don't. So that immediately just like stuck with me. I'm like, this is what I want to write about. So I took it to my writing partner, and we just sort of started to think about like what would be a good, way to make this movie. And we thought doing something, modern day would be good. And then just looking and doing the research, because there was a lot of research that we did for that, finding that it went from, Wales and England in the 1500s, and then it sort of came all the way into the US, the whole concept of sin eating, and it got lost in the Appalachians in like the early like 1900s, and then it kind of disappeared. Like you don't hear about sin eating anymore. So we were like, okay, that's interesting. Like, where did it go? So that was kind of the genesis of thinking about if we were going to do it on modern day, it's sort of this underground thing that maybe people have continued to do. And if so, where can we land, And so we were thinking about different places in town, like maybe Los Angeles, or where in the country. And we landed on Chicago, just because the aesthetics of Chicago is great. It's very much Gotham City, for me, from like Nolan's films, which I really dig. But yeah, from there we just figured out what the story would be. It seemed like a really solid, cautionary tale in a way. I don't know if you remember the movie Blank Check from back in the day. It was like a Disney movie.
Okay, yeah.
I think.
Vaguely.
Yeah, where it's like this kid gets, this blank check, and he's able to do everything. He moves into a house, and there's hijinks and everything. And not to say that we made like a horror movie version of that, but like it sort of struck me a little bit that it's, you've got this young construction worker who is living on his friend's couch. He's not getting by, and he is working at this mansion, sort of building something weird in the backyard. And the old man who is dying gives him this, sort of offer, like, if you eat a meal off my dead body, I'll give you everything. And like, it's a little weird, but how is he going to say no? And then he gets everything that he wants. And then, of course, there's a dark side to that. So, if you're taking on the sins of this person, what have they done? And can it be, I don't know, can these sins turn into something real? And that's where we thought, sort of like 13 Ghosts, having ghosts of the sins, come out and sort of start torturing and coming after this guy. So yeah, once we landed on that, we're like, that feels like a movie to us. And we kind of, wrote the script and went from there.
Right. And there's something else powerful, and I don't want to give the spoilers away, but he also has a tie that from a precarious situation in his life that also kind of haunts him with this. So we'll just leave it at that. But in the beginning, you see what happens. Adam, what is a sin eater?
A sin eater is someone who takes on people's sins by eating a meal off of the deceased's corpse. And this is something that came, I think it was a real thing, but it came out long ago in like Welsh in England. And essentially, a bunch of, villages or whatever, like smaller villages, they would, have a sin eater come and eat a meal off the dead body because they were so religious that they thought that, all of their sins needed to be, eaten away.
And who is the one that they would choose as this sin eater?
They would choose essentially anybody who was like the most destitute in the town. So someone who, could essentially be taken advantage of, someone who needed a meal, anybody who was willing to go in, look at a dead body, go like, yeah, I'll eat a meal off of this. I'll take on your sins, because they believe that to be true. And, it's a pretty terrible thing, but people did do it.
And how did you hear about this relates back to what, the 1600s or whatever it was?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my dad actually is, he kind of like looks around and he's into like pagan rituals. Not that he does pagan rituals, but he's just interested in esoteric things. So in like 2017, he told me about, this concept of sin eating, and he was like, this could make an interesting movie. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I looked into it, and just the fact of, that really creepy thing that people would do, I was like, that's a really great thing to sort of hang a movie on and be a really good starting point for a story.
Why was this a story that you had to write?
I think it was because I did not grow up with a lot of money. Like, I grew up in Des Moines and a part of New Mexico, and my parents, teachers and sort of administrators, and like never really made that much money. So coming out eventually to Los Angeles and being around just the wealth that is kind of everywhere in a lot of pockets, it was really interesting to me, and that's why I kind of felt like the main character Rick. Where he's just like coming into this world and he's like, I don't really know how to act, and in some ways I still don't know how to act when around like big money or people with money. It's interesting. So that was sort of like at least my way into the story. And also the fact that if you're doing something like sin eating, religion is clearly something that we think had to be addressed. So grew up Catholic. And so there's a big, sort of Catholic, theme and religious theme, because like if you're taking on sins, in at least, the way that I understand it, like if you sin, you ask for forgiveness and that sin goes away, right? But what if you're taking on someone else's sins and you don't know what those sins are? And if you can't put yourself in that position where you didn't do it and you can't feel the remorse, then how can you get rid of it? So that's one of the little interesting narrative things that we do in the film.
Right, and also tying in the historical, I wasn't aware of sin eating, but it kind of reminds me of like, the witch trials.
Yeah.
They started in Europe and then they moved here, and sort of the fear around, alleged witches and things like that. So it has this really interesting sort of like historical reference to it.
Yeah.
And the house that you filmed in also feels such a heavy, fascinating character itself.
Yeah.
The mystery. So kudos for landing that location.
Thanks. Yeah. It was a great find, and it really worked for what we needed to. It was big, and a little gothic and imposing and dark. And it's like if you are, moving into an enormous house, an enormous grounds, all by yourself, and you have servants, like people who are there. Do they live there? Do they just work there? Maybe you don't know because the house is so big. Like, how does that feel, Because, like, you have all this space, you're kind of surrounded by people, but, like, you're pretty much alone in general. So, like, having that isolating feel is something that I hope the film accomplished.
It sure does. And in all these yes people, sort of yes people. But anyway, yeah, and just sort of everything's granted to them. Yeah, fascinating. Why do you love writing stories about imbalances, power imbalances between the rich and the poor? Powerful and the sort of the working person?
I think because, like, I've just felt that through my entire life. I think a really specific example is when I was growing up, my dad used to work for companies and state agencies that would help rehabilitate newly blinded people. So I had, blind babysitters when I was younger. And so I was around the world of blind people, which a lot of people aren't. I would say the vast majority of people aren't. But I was able to sort of, be there and see that. And seeing how people would react to blind people walking around, they have the cane, they're navigating. But it was just sort of interesting to see that and, see how people reacted. And then growing up, I mean, maybe this is getting too personal, but I was always really small when I grew up, and I was bullied a bit. So, having that, made me feel a little bit on the back end, on the back foot, as it were. So, yeah, that's kind of why I think I'm just naturally attracted to it. And then seeing, the I guess the wealth disparity that has continued to grow, over the decades, since I've been growing up and just seeing it. We all see it, there's always unrest about it, and, elections are made because of it. So, yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I've just always been attracted to.
Right, and in LA, there's such a need to keep up sort of appearances,
Yeah.
And so we don't really know who is actually wealthy, who's just appearing wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's an interesting thing here in
and I think
Los Angeles.
and I think social media has exacerbated that exponentially, because everybody can put on, their screen what the ideal life is that they're living.
Right.
And it can be totally falsified. So, that makes people feel bad or whatever, but it's just the creation of this facade.
How did you write this big idea to a budget level where the movie could be made?
That's a really good question. We kind of swung for the fences, to be honest. When we first wrote it, we didn't really know what the budget would be, but we had a lot of locations. If you're setting a movie in the world of opulence, you have to find a way to show that. So obviously, that probably costs money from a production side. So when we first wrote it, we're just like, let's write the best version of the script that we want to see. And then if we're ever able to find, investors, because at the time we had no idea. We were writing it completely on spec, and it was just that sort of hope that, well, somebody will see something in this script like we do. And it took a while, but we found, some creative collaborators who really did, and they were able to, get the financing for it and everything. And we're like, great, let's do it. And then the realities of production sort of set in. It's like, you have this amount of money, what can we do to sort of get it in that budget? So we had to cut a few things, that we couldn't realistically shoot, but we were able to fold it into the script in a lot of good ways. And I think we did some condensing and, some really powerful stuff. And I think that always happens when you're sort of put against the wall in terms of all right, you got to reach this number. What can you cut? And you don't just want to cut stuff out. You want to be able to integrate that stuff in there, because it's not just a scene or a sequence or a scare. There's the character's arc. There's, the themes, the meaning. You have to find a way to sort of integrate that throughout. So the rewriting process on it, once, we got the producers on board, was great. And working with the director, I think, was fantastic, because Justin had a lot of great ideas. And, the three of us were able to really, just sit down, bang it out, and get it into a place that budgetarily we could do, which I think, looking at the movie based on the budget and what it looks like, I think we did a lot for what the budget actually is, because it looks like a way better movie, way bigger movie than I think people would realize based on the budget. So, I'm proud of the team for being able to do that. And also from a production logistics standpoint, you have to have, producers that can strike deals with people, get people who are excited about, your project. Maybe they have a bunch of cars that they want to lend you, like a Rolls Royce or whatever. Maybe that happens. Or people with a great house, and and people that just want to work and believe in it and sort of help you out. So that's, that's connections and luck and having the right people, sort of leading the charge in those areas.
Are there tax credits in Illinois?
Yeah, there are. Chicago, Illinois does have some tax credits. So yeah, we were able to take advantage of that.
And also too, maybe not, and this is nothing against California, but being in another state where maybe they were more embracing of film just because there's less production there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago's a big hub, like they shoot a lot of stuff, but they're very welcoming to films, and the Midwest, I'm seeing that a lot more, this sort of, what they call the flyover states, like they're doing a lot of good stuff in terms of like incentives and filming out there, and the crews out there are great. I gotta say, the crew that we had in Chicago was a dream. Like everybody we worked with, they were so great. I really, really loved working with that crew because they were rad. So, but I think that is kind of just in general, and I know everybody talks about that, it's just the incentives for California just are not good enough to keep productions here, just in general, for most budget levels, So when we're, looking at locations, it's kind of never, well, where in LA can we do it? Which is sad for the people that like live here, It's cool when you get to travel and spend like 5 weeks in Chicago, like that's pretty rad, but also, it would be nice to be able to shoot stuff, in your backyard, in your home in a way.
Sure, and if I read correctly, I know the powers that be are working on new plans. I don't know where they are with that, but hopefully we can come to something soon.
Yeah, I hope so.
But and I love the backdrop of Chicago, the different scenes. I thought that was really interesting because I don't always see that. You think of great wealth and sort of fast living as LA or New York. So
yeah, and Chicago really, unfortunately, they do have that sort of like wealth disparity, with the areas that are really poor and the areas that are really rich, and they're pretty close together. So that was one of the reasons why we decided to set, the story of Sin Eater there. And also just because of, the look of the city, it's a great looking city.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of history, like visually it's fantastic.
When you get into the zone of writing, what is that zone?
It's a focus and time stands still. And anything is sort of possible, which I think is a weird thing that I key in. Because when you say that, I can see what it looks like. The sort of edges of my vision sort of focus. And I just I key in and things just come out. The characters are talking to me. They're surprising me. That is the best thing that comes out in writing. When you've done all the pre-work, you've done the outlines, you figured out who your characters are, and you're sitting there and writing it, and then the character wants to do something. And then you just kind of go with it and see where that takes it. So it's improvisational as well. As much as I'm sitting there, with my 25 page Word doc outline, using it for reference as I'm in final draft, when I'm going through, characters will do this or that, and it's just, it's just that inspiration that's hitting you. So it's really great.
Did you write the screenplay for Curse of the Sin Eater in less than 3 months?
Yeah. My writing partner and I did. What we tend to do is spend a lot of time on the outline. That's where the majority of our time is spent. Because that's when, it's really just a Word doc that we're passing back and forth, that, the world is our oyster. You're not locked into a screenplay, or a script yet, it's pretty good. That's really the way that I would like to work and continue to work. So we kind of did that for, maybe a month and a half, maybe 2 months. And then the draft itself, I think it was about a month, maybe a month and a half or so. So yeah, when it gets to the script stage, what I love to do is just get through it as quickly as possible, because then you can get to the rewriting later. But most of the time is spent in outlining.
And this is Will Corona Pilgrim?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And you've collaborated with him before?
Yeah, on many projects.
Right. And he's here in LA?
Yep.
Okay, so you're not like, you're physically seeing him and doing rewrites or different things.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Is there a preferred place? Is there like a coffee shop or no that you go to kind of?
I mean, it really would depend. Yeah, like there was never really one place that we would go, but we would always find a place to like meet up and like go through ideas. But since things like Google Docs, like the shared drives, and now post pandemic the Zoom, like it's a lot easier to sort of do that. Just passing things back and forth. And the thing with something like the Google Docs is that when like we could be simultaneously writing and see what each other is writing.
Oh wow.
Which is pretty great, and like I'll write something and he could just like delete it and throw it out and I'm like, how dare you? But,
Okay. So it's not like a scene in Swingers where you're going to this coffee shop and working
no. I mean it's like both out of our home offices in a lot of ways.
When you and Will were battling back and forth or just thinking of ideas, were you protecting the main character too much? Were there times where you said, you know what, we're being too easy on him or we're being too hard on him?
Yes. And I cannot speak for Will. I will definitely speak for myself. But that is something that over my writing journey, I have come to sort of realize about myself is that sometimes with certain characters, like I do take it easy on them, especially if I identify with their struggle a bit. Like with Rick, I sort of saw myself in his position. I was like, well, I can't go hard on him. Like he can't do this, like he can't do that, because like I think mentally or even emotionally like putting myself too much into that character. And I've learned that I have to divorce myself, you know what I mean? Because we're looking at a story and the best stories just really beat the crap out of their characters, because you need to beat them down over and over and over again so their rise, in the third act can be that much more sweet for the audience. Because I think, thinking about that with real life, like I think a lot of us feel like we get beaten down again and again and again, and we're looking for that, like, well, maybe in the future, like things will get better. And I think stories kind of help us, solidify that, or give us that little bit of hope.
And so much of a comeuppance in the minds of people that are beaten down, I can only speak for myself, but you always think, well, if I had more money or whatever. So then when you see this character and how things change for him financially, it's interesting to watch it play out. We'll just say that. Yeah. And I could see how you would want to protect him. I wanted to protect him. I liked that character so much, even when he did bad things at times.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. Is giving characters that sort of like, sense of grayness. Because it's like, I guess if we're all confronted with that, offer, would you do that to like live a life that we all want? To have millions of dollars, nice cars and everything. I think that's what everybody wants, just in general. So I'd be curious to know how many people would actually do that thing, And I struggled with that myself, like putting myself in Rick's position. It's like, okay, like would I go through with it? I was like, maybe I would, and then if I did, and those sins actually, were coming to haunt me, like, that's a hard thing to deal with. So yeah, like, but again, can't take it too easy on your characters, even though you're putting yourself in their shoes and sometimes.
Right, I'm thinking of the movie, is it Indecent Proposal? With Robert Redford and Demi Moore and Woody Harrelson. And I just remember going to, I think it was Universal Studios, to the movies, and they got the tickets ready. We drove through and they go, last question, would you do it? So they were asking everybody, which was great because I never forgot that, And it was like this sort of the 90s sort of dilemma. Would you do it? But this is different because you're also taking on past wrongs. Very, very fascinating, thoughts and stay with me for a long time. How has your screenwriting process changed in the last 5 years?
In the last 5 years, I think I've gotten better, just in general, because I think with time, comes seasoning, and then you just kind of get better. But I've definitely seen since 2024 or no, sorry, since 2020. Like, I think a lot of things changed for a lot of people in 2020 because of all that. But I just was able to, I think, kind of plumb the depths of my emotions. And so the first script that I wrote out of that was a very personal story based on something that was happening to my in-laws. And that's, when I wrote that, I sort of did it, for her, my wife, and for them. But people really responded pretty positively to it, And I was like, oh, this is what I was missing all the time, is that like sort of deep emotionality, which I think for me just came with like growing older, and having life happen to me. So I've been able to sort of get into that. And another thing around that time where I really wanted to stick to, because before I was writing a lot of different things. Like my first feature is kind of a drama, a little bit of a thriller. And I've written, with Will, we've written comedies, we've written period piece TV pilots, we've written sort of musical type, whimsical things like. And when I was younger, I was like, I want to do this. I want to write horror and sci-fi and romance and all of this stuff. And I remember, a mentor saying, you should really figure out like your brand and what you want to write, and that's like one genre. You're the action person or the horror person, or the romantic comedy person. You're like that person. And like being youthful, I was like, no. Like I can do it all, I can do everything. And I realized that one, I can't, it was good to do all that stuff because I realized like I can't do a romantic comedy, like I don't want to write those specific beats that you have to hit, like, figuring all of that out. But it was when I landed on horror that I was like, it's where I started my career. My very first shorts in college were all like horror. And then I kind of stepped away from it for a bit. But when I came back with all of the stuff that I had written before and the life experience as well, when I resettled into like, no, like horror is the thing. And Sin Eater really kicked that off. It was like, oh yeah, like I got to keep doing this. Because my goal was around fall of every year, like around October, I was going to write a horror script. Just like, for the season. But then I realized like, no, I want to write that like year round. Like that is what I want to do. Because I found that I could take any story that I would want to tell that people probably wouldn't want to make if it was like a drama or whatever. And they would make it if it was, a horror movie, like packaged in that horror, element. And I also just like, messing with people a bit, like to be able to evoke emotions out of people, like when they watch it, whether it's in a theater, whether it's at home, at a film festival, whatever, like there is no better feeling than when someone or an audience especially reacts to something that you did. Like it's a powerful, addictive sort of feeling. And horror is perfect for that because you got the screams, the gasps, the tension, and you can really play with that. So yeah, like I got into that and ever since then it's just been horror. And it's, it's been working out for me, I would say.
Right, I'm thinking of Lisa Frankenstein. That's sort of a rom-com horror. Mm-hmm. I loved it. I thought it was good. But even in Curse of the Sin Eater, the main character, there are times when it's actually very sad for him, and there's a lot of emotion where I feel like a lot of film doesn't go there. So I felt, because of things in his past, that very I wanted to protect him, and I felt bad for him a lot of times. So.
Yeah, and that's. I do think that Sin Eater was definitely like the genesis of me, helping me figure out what my voice, as a screenwriter was. And it's like I like emotional things, I like deep emotions. I like, family issues, families sort of being at each other's throats. Like I found that, to really work for me, and the character stuff, and that's stuff that I used to write in other genres, but like I built that all together, into the into the horror genre. And yeah, like it's really, it's good, and it's gratifying to be able to write those things, you know, and have those deep emotions, you know, like emotional horror. I think there's a place for that. I mean, you look at something like Terrifier 3, it's you know, super gory, and there's a place for that. And you look like Hereditary, and there's a place for that. Like, that's the best thing about horror just in general, is that there's so many different types of it. You know, you mentioned Lisa Frankenstein. You know, it can be a romantic horror, like, you know, there can be funny horrors, Evil Deads, like, just the world of horror is so broad, which I think is fantastic. And horror fans themselves are accepting of so much, which is great. Horror fans just in general are rad.
Yeah, they are.
But yeah, like, and our movie, Curse of the Senior, it's, you know, it's very tense, you know, and maybe it's a little understated. I don't know. It certainly does not have a lot of jump scares and like the sort of big budget, you know, scares that you would think. Like, it's a little, I would say it's a little bit of a thinker. It's very tense. I think it's, you know, terrifying when you think about, you know, the situation in and of itself. And that is where, you know, my sort of interest in horror is the situations themselves, not necessarily the ghosts in the closet or the jump scares, but just like, if people are in a really bad situation, what does that do to them? How do they get out? How do they survive?
In our last interview, which was 2019, I believe you said you thought you were weak with story structure. And I'm wondering how you feel about this now.
Yeah, I did say that. And I definitely felt that at the time. And I think it was important for me to understand that, you know, based on, you know, my first film, Broken Ceiling, and the reception to it. I was like, okay, like, I'm good with character interactions, I'm good with dialogue, but I think the story structure maybe wasn't like fully there. So that's something that I set out to really work on. And it took a lot of work, you know, like I never went to film school, and it was all sort of self-taught. And it was at that point, you know, post 2020, where I was like, I should probably like take at least a course, you know, and I've read a lot of books, but let me get some actual instruction and try to figure that out. So I took a UCLA extension course, which was super, super helpful.
Love them. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And it taught me so, so much. And a lot of it was, yes, like learning how to write, but it was less a course about, you know, like, here are the fundamentals of writing, and more about read everybody else in the class's script and then break it apart, give them notes. And that teaches you so much about, you know, structure, what's working, what's not. You know, when you look at it in somebody else's, and then you reflect on your own and go, okay, what do I need to do? And I think one of the things that has helped me probably the most, Craig Mazin did a script notes episode. I don't remember the number. It might have been like 403 or 493 or something.
I'm hearing that's a good one. Yeah.
Yes. And it's just, he breaks down in amazing terms. I think it was Finding Nemo. And like, that kind of blew my brain out a bit. And also the Pixar story structure, that you can find that online. That is super helpful. But that Craig Mazin talk, man, I got to tell you, that was killer. And so I used that on one of my scripts. Like, I had that open side by side with the script, and I was like, it was more of an exercise than anything, where I was like, let me take these beats that he outlines and like, let me do that to my script, right? Because that is not something that I did. Like, I would hit the usual, like, inciting incident, opening image, inciting incident, you know, like first act, second act, midpoint, third act, you know, turn, belly of the beast, all of that. I would do that, but this was so much more specific in terms of the turns, you know, that you put your characters through, and in terms of the structure that it sort of does. And as Craig says, it's perfect for the sort of like crowd pleasing, you know, like Finding Nemo, bigger budget movies. Like, he says you wouldn't use it for, you know, some of the indie fare, or, you know, if you're trying to do something different. So it's not a one size fits all thing at all. But I found it super helpful for one of my most recent scripts. And yeah, it's seeing people's reactions to reading it makes me go, oh yeah, like this structure really works for these types of films. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think we talked about in 2019 that you liked Masterclass, which I love as well.
Yeah.
But there is something about being in an actual class and not just Zoom. I mean, no shade against Zoom or anything, but just around other students that are working professionals, and UCLA Extension and any of the community colleges are also a great place because you know, you're kind of like seeing their thing and seeing that they're rushing from their jobs, and there's like this goal, and you see like just that's sort of the trajectory of their stories.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think I needed to tell myself, because I had been doing it, I mean, I think I started in earnest writing screenplays like my senior year of college. So, been at it for like 20 years now. So at that point, it was like maybe like 14, 15 years in. And I was like, well, I don't need to take a course or a class or anything. Like, I've been doing this, right? But I was like, I shouldn't have, I don't know if it's being cocky, but it's just coming to the realization where it's like, you know what? Like, just take it. Like, learn something new, get a new mindset. And that's what taking the class really helped me do. It's just, I learned stuff that I didn't really know, and it absolutely helped my writing and sort of like accelerated my skills.
And then with Will, was he taking classes at all too, or you just kind of come together with two different mindsets?
Yeah, came together with two different mindsets. Yeah, he's got his journey, which is great. He's really big into writing comics as well as screenplays. So that's a whole nother world that I have not jumped into. But yeah, and I think that's always something that made our writing partnership strong, is that we came, from very different mindsets of things. Like the things that he loves are different from the things that I love. But when we come together and put all of our, shared loves together and sort of our differences together, like it creates something really fun.
After you've written your first draft, what is your rewriting process?
After I write the first draft, I mostly like to let it sit and I move on to something new. Because like I've just come out of the excitement of writing the first draft, and everything's really fresh, and all of my ideas are still sort of like stuck in that. So if I were to go ahead and rewrite it, I don't think I would do as good of a job unless I got some separation. So I'll usually put it to the side. I will have something like a next project that I'm already looking to write. So I may start on the outline for that, or continue on the outline for that, or, in some rare cases, maybe even start, the new draft of a rewrite, or even start a new script. So I like to get some separation from it just in general.
And so because you and Will are using like a Google Doc, he's already looked at your first draft and vice versa? Yeah.
When we're writing stuff together, because I've written stuff on my own as well since 2020. It's good to have that other set of eyes, who can look at it, and we each have our own, sort of take on it, and then we'll go away, and then come back together when we both feel like, all right, let's tackle this again.
So do you have like again, I'm sorry, what was the time frame? A few weeks or?
It really depends. It really depends on like how long I've been with it, like just thinking most recently on sort of the stuff that I've written by myself. The most recent script that I wrote, I think it was like the second half of the year, this past summer, where I really started to write the outline, did a couple of, passes at that. And then it was in October when I did the first draft, and I cranked that out in less than 30 days, which I'm pretty happy about. That was a fun one to write, and I sort of blew through that. But in this case, it's been a little different because I've taken it, to some friends to get feedback, and to this writers group I'm a part of to get feedback, and that's been super helpful. So I'm already rewriting it. So I don't think I've given myself that separation. But once I'm done with this rewrite, I think I'll have that, like, I would say an official, like, really good first draft that I would probably think about sending out, even though it's, like the second or possibly third real draft.
And you said that every October you wanted to be working on something new,
Yeah.
and then you realized, I just want to be working on something all year round that's
Yeah.
sort of thriller, Halloween,
Yeah,
horror inspired.
specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is something very invigorating for us Halloween lovers about the season, even here in California, which people claim there are no seasons. There kind of are.
Yeah, there are.
The weather gets a little cooler-ish. But yeah, there is something that just, it feels like it's like a muse that takes over once that sort of August time comes to an end,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And
I feel it too.
I think living in Los Angeles, specifically in the Valley, like around the Burbank area, oh man, like Burbank, I love Burbank because it is just like, it's kind of like the horror capital of the West, I think. Like there's so many like horror specific shops that are on like the strip on Magnolia Boulevard.
Right, yeah.
And like the houses, like people are so into holidays in general, but like Halloween, they go all out.
Right.
Like just driving around. So it's like, that even like pumps me up even more just to, you know, going to work and seeing like all of the yard displays and the big like 20-foot tall werewolves and stuff. Like it's getting crazy out there, but I love it.
If you were interested in storytelling, you may also like our new book, Story Questions, the sponsor of today's video. It's a story tool that offers you over 1,500 story questions that you can use as story prompts. It's packed with over 40 categories, so whether you are in the brainstorming stages, developing characters, dialogue, or rewriting, it can help you at every stage of the writing process. Think about this statement. Most powerful stories are just great answers to strong questions. We've linked up to story questions in the information section below. Now back to the interview. Why is rejection a good thing? Or is it?
Yeah. I used to, for the longest time, think that rejection was a bad thing. Like the end of the world sort of thing. Like you get rejected, you don't get this or that opportunity, like it's over, right? But I think in a lot of cases, rejection and failure is where you learn the absolute most. And it's really the only way to grow, because if you're doing everything right, you're just going to continue moving forward thinking that you're doing everything right when in fact you could be doing a lot of things wrong. So for rejection specifically, you know, if you reach that barrier and, you know, you want this opportunity and you're not able to get it, it makes you go, okay, well, why would that be? You know, if I couldn't get it and I wanted it and I tried for it and I didn't get it, then it requires you to do some like soul searching and go, okay, like, are there skills that I'm missing? Is there any way to sort of like up my game? And then you figure that out. So, you know, that could be, okay, if I don't have this experience, how do I go get that experience? You know, do I need to do a short film or something that can get me in that arena, you know, in that specific genre if you're not working in that genre? So that's, I think rejection is kind of key.
Yeah, and then life teaches us too that sometimes things are political in nature, and I don't mean DC politics. I mean, you know, friendships or whatever. And so that's a bitter pill to swallow as well. And we can always face that in life, and we can be mad about it. And sometimes there's just nothing that we can do.
Yeah, and sometimes the thing is, like, sometimes it doesn't pay off ever, you know, and a loss is just a loss. Sometimes it does pay off and you learn something and you grow and you go on to something better, or it leads you to a different opportunity that could be better, you know, because I'm a big believer in that, you know, life is a path, and, you know, things aren't necessarily random, and things could be built for a purpose, you know, a path for a purpose. Yeah, so I think rejection is a really good way, a sort of bumper, if you will, to maybe lead you on the path that maybe you should be. So it can be a blessing in disguise, or it can just be nothing. And you just have to deal with that loss and that hurt. But even then, you know, that can teach you something along the way as well.
Right. Well, you know, we've all known people that feel rejected and are like, you know, I'm leaving this town. No one wants me here. And, you know, forget this. I'm going to clean up my language here, but I'm leaving. And it seems like you take things in stride, or maybe I'm just assuming.
I mean, outwardly, yeah.
Okay.
I take things in stride.
That's better,
but like,
yeah.
But like,
That's all that matters.
You know, alone at home, like, yeah, it's
Sure.
it hits, you know, and I think it affects everybody, but it's really about what you do next. And I don't think giving up is ever an option. I think pivoting, learning, self-reflecting, those are all things that are sort of necessary, but it is action. You know, like if you get rejected and you just do nothing, then it's like you can sort of lose and you can just sort of be done. But if you take action, you know, and really sort of try to key in on that rejection, you know, maybe it gives you motivation, the feeling of loss or rejection. You know, maybe you have that sort of like, oh, I'll show them, you know, like anything that gets you to action, I think is important.
How can one project flow into another?
In a lot of ways, that can be unknowable, which is kind of cool. But you know, if you're working on a feature and then you get an idea for another feature or a short, like I think you should just kind of do that, you know, because you don't know where the paths are. You know, you want to chase the green lights, you know, and sort of try to avoid the red lights or hit the red lights and then go around. That's a whole Matthew McConaughey thing. That book, Green Lights, it's fantastic. Highly recommend it. But yeah, it's just, I think for me at least, it comes down to the core of like, what do I want to do and what excites me, right? Because that's my divining rod of like, okay, if I follow what I want to do, what I'm passionate about, what I'm interested in, then I don't think it's ever going to like turn out wrong, you know, because I'm going to enjoy what I'm doing along the way, you know, and then you get the happy surprises where like, oh, you know, like a great actor wants to be in your, you know, little tiny project that you're going to shoot at your house, you know, it's like, oh, that's cool, great. And I did that because I had this idea that I wanted to do, and, you know, like, and I learned something from this other project that I'm going to take into the smaller thing. And then you go from there, you know, and then, you know, maybe you take that short on the film festival route and you meet some people, and then, you know, you have like people who are your fans there, you know, and people who are your friends, and you can sort of work on things together and move forward together, you know, so it can vacillate from you doing something just on your own and like having to wear that backpack and carry that, you know, push that boulder up the hill, you know, and sometimes you get a group of people, you know, who you all do it together. It just kind of depends, but it's following that path. And I mean, I think certainly having that, not an end goal, but a certain goal that you see in the future, you know, so you're not like acting reactively, I think is something to keep you on the path, but try to build that career that you want. And it may take you different directions, but at least you have that sort of end goal in mind.
And just to go back to your writing again, you say you like stories that are about sort of power imbalance, rich versus poor, but you also seems like you like supernatural sort of mediumship. You're you know, attracted to maybe being able to communicate with the deceased in some ways. Where does that come from?
Oh man, I am fascinated with what is on the other side, and that started in college, where I took a class called Death and Dying, and really like heavy emotional thing, you know, to take a whole semester about death and dying. But I was so fascinated, and it really sparked my interest in like what is on the other side, you know. So hearing about hospice, you know, workers and when people are at the end of their life and they see family members, like that is interesting to me, you know, because it's like, why is it always someone who's passed on that is coming as sort of the guide into, you know, the other side? Like, that's always fascinating. Why isn't anybody else? Why isn't it somebody who's like living now? You know, is that something the mind creates? Is that actually real? So there's just like this, I think I have this fascination of wondering what's on the other side. And so in my projects, I like to try to figure that out, you know, just go through my ideas, you know, not to spoil anything about Curse of the Sin Eater, but, that's certainly something that we try to explore, because it is about death and dying and sins and all of that. So yeah, it's something that's always interested me, and I'm finding that I'm trying to attack whatever my central thesis is, or to figure out my understanding of what's on the other side, because it's inevitable for everybody. So maybe I'm afraid, and I'm trying to prepare myself for what's out there, but I don't know, it's just fascinating.
Sure. And have you ever been to, let's say, New Orleans, or, did you play in graveyards as a kid? I don't know.
No. I have been to New Orleans when I was younger, and that was a really fascinating experience, which I remember. And I've had, this may sound crazy, but I've had brushes with, ghostly things. In London, there was a whole story that I could share that was kind of crazy, and like seeing dark shapes in the corner of my apartment at some point, and my wife is very much a skeptic. She does not want to see that stuff. But, when we went to Salem, Massachusetts, one time she saw something, and, it's like, to have my skeptic wife see something, I was like, okay, like there's something to this. So there's just been enough like little evidence of seeing supernatural stuff in my life where I'm like, okay, like I don't know what it is, but I kind of want to know more and investigate it.
Are you harder on yourself now or easier on yourself when it comes to goals for projects? You seem very driven.
Yeah. I think I'm easier on myself now, a little bit, because so many things have not happened in the way that I wanted, like especially in my 20s and even through my 30s. I was like, okay, this has to happen. I'd have my dream cast. I would have, I'm going to take it to this big spot or this or that. And like a lot of that stuff just didn't work out. So having a lot of that like failure and rejection, I would say hardened me a little bit to that, but also made me more realistic. And I really just came out with like, okay, like I want to be able to do this full time, at some point, but even if I can't, I'm still doing it. I'm still being able to write. I can still make movies, that in and of itself is a blessing. So when I get rejections, which still happen, I try not to look at them as a sort of, devastating thing, and I don't beat myself up so much. It's like, I just try to learn from it and try to move forward.
Right. I was watching a comedy, came up on the side of YouTube. It was free with ads, and it was called like Smart Alec. And it was about a guy who was a PA who was a screenwriter, and his journey of meeting all these eccentric characters in LA who said, I'm going to fund your movie. Mm-hmm. And it is as kind of silly and cheesy and fun as it is. It's actually, it was an interesting look at how the industry works.
Yeah.
And so many people were like leading him on with different promises.
Yeah.
You had the wealthy heiress who just wanted to sort of date him and was stringing him along, and just all these different things. But the main goal was, how do I get this picture made? Mm-hmm. And most of it all fell through.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that is just sort of rinse and repeat. That's what happens to people. I don't know. I've never been through it, so.
I mean, that movie sounds like what I experienced early on, because I was a PA and I had a script and I was trying to get it to people. I mean, like, yeah, there's so many people out there, not to say that everybody or anyone has like any bad intentions, but
no.
But people are just, like they're doing what they're sort of doing, I guess, So yeah, you totally encounter that out here with people who have a lot of promises or want to do something and can follow through, and also maybe can't follow through for whatever reason. So yeah, that sounds pretty on point, that movie.
Yeah, I think they renamed it to Hollywood Dreaming or something like that. But I thought it's like they should show this in film schools, because as silly as it is, I feel like it talks about the industry in a very realistic way.
Yeah.
When we spoke to you in 2019, Adam, at one point you said you imagine yourself as a gifted young auteur, and then you started to realize that you weren't. Do you think that that was almost a blessing that you did see yourself in that way because it enabled you to take risks?
Maybe. I've honestly been thinking about that recently. It's interesting that you bring that up, because part of me goes like the folly of youth. Like I was so, like egotistical and like full of myself. But I think that that was like kind of a good thing, right? Because like that sort of, insane self-belief to be able to move from Minnesota to Los Angeles and drive out, with like not a lot of money and be like, I'm gonna make it in this town. Like I know a lot of people do that, but
Right.
like you really have to have that sort of insane self-belief to come into such a competitive market in a town and be like, I'm gonna make a mark. Like that's kind of crazy, But like I thought that. But I think that that was probably a good thing, especially in the early years, because that is what drove me. I was like, I'm gonna be like Robert Rodriguez. I'm gonna be like Tarantino, And it's like I certainly wasn't. God bless me. But I needed time to write and to live and to just sort of season myself and get better. And I think that is the majority of people. And that's not what I thought when I was younger. I was like, oh, like you gotta, like the Shane Black big screenplay sales of the 90s. You're like, oh yeah, like I like that. Because people like the big flashy stories, like they don't like the person who's, underground, kind of like just been doing it for 20 years and then finally, makes a small movie or whatever. Like that's not as exciting in terms of stories and publicity. But I in some ways I still have a little bit of that voice in me because it just keeps me going, But it has been tempered out with the reality of like, okay, like I'm not going to be a Tarantino or a Scorsese or a Rodriguez or anything, but where can I be happy with myself, and where my skills are? And knowing that I can keep improving my skills, if I just keep working at it, which is great. So I don't know where I'll land. I sort of have erased, that end goal. And it's really more about like the journey and am I proud of what I've done? Am I proud of what I'm doing now? And just do I want to keep moving forward and doing it? And I do, because it gives me immense joy to be able to think up new ideas, as hard as that is for me, and to be able to write it and to be able to make something. Like it's exciting and it's a high and it's what I love, and it really resonates with my soul, as cheesy as that may sound. But
Do you really feel like those Robert Rodriguez, Tarantino stories, Shane Black, that those are actually still happening today? That was a different time,
totally different time.
just totally different world. Social media
Yeah.
wasn't really
Yeah.
wasn't around. Maybe with Shane Black, I'm not sure the year that
Yeah,
sale
yeah.
happened, but
I mean, I think one of the problems, and maybe it's not a problem, but it was the information that I was going off of based on, when I was born and when I came of age, where it's like, I thought that the model of the 90s, especially the early 90s with Kevin Smith and Tarantino and blowing up, with Sundance, like, I thought that that still applied in the mid to late 2000s. But that's when YouTube, was really coming aboard and influencers were not a thing, and content creators were not a thing back then. So it was this weird middle part where I was moving forward using the information from a bygone era that I thought was still existing in, LA in 2007 and beyond. And it kind of wasn't, if you made, like a sort of paranormal activity found footage thing, like, that would be a way to do it. But then I think it all switched to social media and content creators and YouTube stars. And now that is, I think, probably the new model for how people will try to make it in the future, which as a film lover is depressing to me a lot. But at the same time, I think the chances are still just as slim, to become viral or to be like the next big content creator. Like now, I'm sure that's even harder than before because of how many people can do that and are trying to do that.
Sure, but in some ways, I think it's great that you, if you want to call it arrogance, I didn't see that in you when we spoke, 4 or 5 years ago. But I think that in some ways, that's great that you had that gumption, I guess we could call it that, to drive out. It's a scary thing. It seems like you have a support system, and it's, not everybody can stay. A lot of people would turn the car around at a certain point.
Yeah.
You get your car towed enough times, or somebody, whatever, steals the backpack out of your, trunk or something. As things happen here, you're like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
But so I think in some ways maybe that was really helpful.
Yeah, I think so.
Stayed.
I think so. But I also have to look at it as like if things had not, I don't want to say worked out, but like, when you're getting these green lights, and I'll bring that up again. If I kept, getting that big red light and things weren't working, right? I think I probably would have stopped at some point. But, things kept progressing, I guess, in like a positive way. So it's like, okay, well, like, this is kind of working. Let me keep going. And I've just kept following that path, following that thread, to get me where I am today. And it's not necessarily where I thought I would be back then, but I'm pretty happy with where I am. Looking back and be like, I have 2 features under my belt. I have a bunch of shorts under my belt. I'm writing new things. I'm getting better, with my skills. Like, that's all that really matters to me now.
And you have a book, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So very cool. And you work in the industry, and it looks like a really cool job too. So I think you should be proud.
Thanks.
How is your approach to writing novels different from writing screenplays?
I'm terrible at writing novels.
Okay.
I'll just say that straight up.
What's terrible about them?
I don't think that's necessarily my forte. Screenwriting is definitely my forte. But my approach for writing novels, I've only done one. And I really wrote it because I wrote a script. And it's very, very big, and I'm like, okay, it's not going to get made necessarily, so maybe I should just write a book so that it can be, pre-existing IP, as a lot of people are doing now. Like they'll write a book, it'll get optioned, turn into a script, turn into a movie. So that was kind of my approach for that, because I knew that the idea and the script itself was so big.
You said you're not good at writing a novel. Where do you think your weaknesses lie?
I don't know if I'm not good at it. I just know that there are so many better writers than me in terms of that sort of prose format. And I don't think that I really put enough work into figuring out how to write that way. Like I was using skills that I learned in high school and college. And, I think writing a novel is a bit of a different skill set than writing screenplays. And I was putting all of my time into learning and, sort of trying to perfect writing screenplays. So the novel was kind of a departure. It was a fun departure. And I learned a lot, and I think that helped my screenwriting as well. But yeah, like I haven't done it since. I think I might. When people read Circus, they're like, we need another book. It's like, okay, cool. Like I can do that. But I think that's one of those things that'll have to carve out time and really figure out, a better way to do that. Because maybe I'm just not very confident in my skills, writing novels as I am screenplays.
What do you love about circus or festival culture, sort of the carnival world? What is that you're attracted to?
Oh, I think the different characters. I think that's a fascinating thing for circuses in general. And then when you take circus characters and put them, it's perfectly matched for horror. Like so many people are scared of clowns, just clowns as they are, and you can go the it route and make them super horrific or not, and people will still be scared. But yeah, it's just, I think the characters and it really lends itself to horror and fun situations.
Right, and there's sort of I don't want to use the word gypsy because I guess that's not an okay word anymore. So, but there's sort of a transient nature sometimes to some of those jobs in that, you're only needed for so long. And so there's an opportunity for interesting people to kind of come into the mix. I've always been fascinated with street performers because there's something very similar, that busker sort of interesting, like who has the gumption to do that, because it takes a lot, you know, and you can get arrested if you don't have the proper sort of licensing and stuff. So yeah, there's an interesting character that would kind of want to join that world.
Yeah, for sure.
How do you develop an interesting hook for your novel with circus? How did you get people sort of invested in the story?
Yeah, I think with any story that I write, it's who are the characters, why do we care about them, and what situation are we going to put them into that you as a reader have not seen before. So that's where I start. I go, okay, you know, if there is this circus out there that's on an island, and there's also, you know, a dilapidated, you know, sort of mental institution for the criminally insane, and there's a breakout, you know, and they take over the sort of, you know, circus performers' roles, and people are trapped on an island with them, a little bit like Jurassic Park in a way, like, but with circus performers and you know, a little bit of Arkham Asylum, like, that's, I think we got a stew going.
Why do we care about the protagonist in circus?
Why do we care about the protagonist in circus? I mean, he's a single father, you know, who's doing his best, and he has a background in the military, you know, and a sort of checkered history, you know, with his ex-wife, and he's just, you know, doing his best with his son who is in high school, and he can't really connect to him, so he thinks that taking him to this circus might be a good thing, you know, and this kid's growing up, he's sort of on the cusp of you know, becoming a man, and his father, you know, is taking him to a circus, which is maybe a little infantile, but, you know, the son himself too wants to connect with the father. So, you know, it's really about these two, you know, family members who want to connect, and they don't know how, and they think that coming to this last night of this circus that's closing down could be that, and then it turns into a life and death situation.
It's interesting too, because we don't always hear about single dads. It seems like the single mom trope is so prevalent. And so why single dad? That's fascinating to me.
I felt that it was underrepresented, like you said, you know, and it's something that I like to do. I like to see, you know, where the current is, where we're getting a lot of representation, and I go, okay, like, where can I do something different, you know, and what interests me? So in this specific case, a single father, you know, with a military background, you know, with a son who's the opposite of him, you know, like sensitive and a band geek, you know, I thought was a really good way to go, because I was, you know, a sensitive, you know, band geek back in the day, so.
What are some great ways to start a novel? Or maybe you have examples from a few recent novels you've read where you're just boom in that world and you don't want to leave.
I think starting, you know, the story at an interesting place, you know, as soon as you can in a really interesting way, I think that's probably the best way. Like, just, am I reading something new? Because there's so much out there, you know. It's, what's the hook? And I think you have to hook people right away.
And then with circus, why did you choose to start it where you started it? What was the reason that you jumped into that point as the starting? I haven't read it, so forgive me.
Sure.
I don't know, but
I mean, I thought that the way it starts, you know, with a rainy night, and you start on the institution for the criminally insane, you know, all these rough customers, and you know, you set up the sort of ringleader who will be the ringleader in the circus itself, and it's just very ominous, and you get the sense that something bad is going to happen, you know, and you don't give it all away right out the gate, but I think a really ominous, creepy, you know, foreboding way for that is I thought the perfect way to start that. And then you go into, you know, here's the father and the son and all of that, but yeah, starting with something bad is coming is the way I wanted to go.
But you're hinting at it, so you're not sort of hitting the reader over the head with it.
Yeah, because it sets the mood, because you really want to set up, where the audience is going to be living, So if I started with, the dad and the father, you could think it would be any other type of story. But if you start, in an interesting place, this asylum, and it's raining outside and it's gloomy and you can tell that these people are interested in breaking out, like then you go, okay, like that's where we're going to be living, later in the story.
I understand you love directly getting to the dialogue and scenes. You kind of don't want to deal with a lot of other stuff. You want to get right to sort of the meat of the story and the conversation. Is that right?
Maybe back in the day, yeah. Nowadays, though, that comes later, I think. Now it's more, about what the story is, who the characters are, and what the situations are that they're going to be thrust into.
How did you work on the dialogue for your novel Circus?
A lot of it was, in a way, transcribing what I had written in the feature screenplay. So to that, I would have to go back to the screenplay and pull, the dialogue from there.
Sure. So when you have this sort of military single dad and then the artsy son, how are you distinguishing their dialogue? Is one sort of like giving orders and, we're going to the circus or whatever? I don't know. I'm just assuming. And the other one sort of dragging his feet, doesn't want to go. I don't know. How are you establishing these two characters in their dialogue? Is there a staccato to his speaking?
Yeah, a little bit. You sort of nailed it there. For the father, it's a bit of that staccato nature, but it's also him just like not understanding his son, and it's that awkwardness of being the single dad with like this teenage son who is living a completely different life that you led when you were that age, and so you don't really know what to say. So the dialogue, like he's trying to make jokes, but it's not working. He's trying to be a cool dad, but that's like not really working. And the son, just doesn't get him. So there's that distance that comes in the son's dialogue. That a bit of aloofness.
Right. Interesting. But at least it sounds like the son knows that his dad cares.
Yeah, definitely does.
Okay. And then when you're having the some of the carnival workers or circus workers speaking, what's their dialogue like and why those choices?
It's so specific to each character, because where I started was from archetypes. And I went, okay, what are all the classic circus performers? You got the strongman, trapeze artist, ringleader, etc. And what I did for those characters specifically, which is a departure from the screenplay, but what I kind of wanted to do, and this is where, I think for me writing the novel was cool because it kind of cracked my brain open. It took the script and putting it into novel form, like so much more was coming out. So I wanted to come up with really elaborate backstories for each of the circus performers because I didn't want them to just be like the archetype, and even though they're criminally insane and locked up because they've done terrible things, I wanted to have empathy for them, that you as the reader may not ever read in it, but I wanted to have that because I needed to write that. So I wrote short stories for each of the circus performer characters, sort of, how they got to where they are, like the crime that they committed or what they did that got them locked up, and the hints at what classic circus character they may, eventually turn into. Like the person with, like there's a pyromaniac. Of course, he'll turn into the fire breather, right? So just putting that together, that was a lot of fun. I think I may take those stories and package it into like an extended version of the novel at some point. But it was really helpful for me because that helped me inform how they spoke, and really made their characters very specific and very fun to write.
That's interesting. So you wrote the screenplay and then you wrote the backstory, or you already started writing the backstory first before the screenplays?
No, I wrote the screenplay, and then that was that. And I was like, let me take this to a novel. And I think before I was writing that, I was like, let me do these short stories, just to better understand these characters. Because that was work that I didn't do for the screenplay. That in a way I wish I would have done. And, I may do that for a future screenplay, because I think that can be super helpful, based on the project or the story that you're telling. But yeah, I did that, and then there was full court press into the novel.
And how long were these short stories?
Oh, they were, between like 5, 10, sometimes up to 20 pages.
Right. So what's your take on when we talk to different people with all different opinions on backstory and character bios? What's your take if you were a writing teacher? Do you think it's important?
I do think it's important, but I have a couple of minds of it. Because sometimes, I think it was Aaron Sorkin who does not do, I think he said he doesn't do a lot of, sort of backstory writing, because his thing was, if you're putting in, if you're writing that the character likes oranges, like in a backstory, it's going to find a way to like show up in the script. And does it need to be there? And so I've thought about that, and I was like, that's an interesting perspective for sure. But when it comes to really fully understanding your characters, I think if you need to do that or want to do that, in terms of making them fully fleshed out and realized and making them sound like real people, I think that's super important, and then everybody should probably do, because if you're putting a character into a situation, you need to know how they'll react. And so how do you do that without really fully diving into, potentially deeper backstory on the characters?
So almost like if you did little trading cards about each one or
Yeah.
something, like
Yeah.
some cool little archetype card. And so then you did that, and then you wrote the novel, and you wrote it maybe, did you reveal all of these sort of things in their backstory, or you knew it as the author?
I knew it. I might have hinted at certain things here and there, but because I knew it, that was kind of all I needed to write it.
Did you self-publish Circus, or did you have a publisher?
Self-published.
How did that go?
It was good. That was a really good learning experience, because you have to figure out, how to format it. Like you write in a Word doc, but how do you format it for a PDF or a Kindle or, a printed out copy, so learning the nuts and bolts of the mechanics of that was very interesting. And then, figuring out marketing for the art, for the cover art. I was lucky to have a fantastic artist, Andy Park, do the cover art for Circus. I think it sells it so well, and Andy's just a fantastic artist and a great dude. But yeah, like you got to think about that as well, because there's, bookstores with all the books out there, all the covers, electronically on the, Amazon Kindle store, there's so much, and you want to find a way to stand out and let people know what they're getting into. So that's a big thing that you have to think about as well. Anything that you're self-doing, whether it's self-distributing a movie or doing that with a smaller distributor where the marketing is on you, like you got to figure that stuff out, which is kind of hard if you don't have like the marketing mindset. You can farm that out to people, but it's just another another thing that you have to do, but it's so important.
And then are you getting a separate LLC for the book?
Separate LLC for the book? No, I just kind of put it up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have to get something called an ISBN?
ISBN, yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. That is essentially the barcode that is specific to your book.
And what is it, and how do you get one?
It's really easy if you're self-publishing on Kindle, because they just give it to you.
Oh, I see. So
Which is great. You have that opportunity if you want it for them to give you, your barcode and ISBN.
And so you don't have to have a separate company for your book. you can just be like, I'm Adam Davis, I'm an author, screenwriter?
Yeah.
Okay.
I may not be doing it the right way, but that's how I did it.
Sure. And then when you're using a Word doc or Pages, are you putting it into any other special program to get it ready for print or Kindle form?
Yeah. The KDP, the publishing arm of Amazon, they have this whole thing, where they make it really easy. You can input the Word doc in there and they sort of guide you through, like building out a self-published book.
Oh, so you can see it page by page. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And did you do any kind of artwork within the book?
Yeah. My writing partner, Will, actually helped me out with this. He, Andy did the cover art and Will did all the design inside. So he took, an element of like the circus tent and made it like a really cool, like grungy look. And that's used for like the different chapter headings. So Will helped me out with some of that design stuff.
So within KDP, you can basically see the blueprint of the book, like from the copyright page to the end?
Yep.
Oh,
yep. You see
nice.
all that. And then, you can order proof copies to make sure, if you're doing a printed out version, to make sure it's all good. And then if you're doing like a Kindle version, you can see it in the sort of like Kindle, window in there to make sure that it all looks good. So yeah, it's pretty slick.
And then when you wrote the book, did you copyright it first or then sent it to KDP?
I copyrighted it first, yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yep.
So you actually registered it, you didn't just mail yourself a copy?
Yeah, exactly.
That's great,
Yeah.
Okay. And how long does that process take?
It's pretty quick, just registering it with the Library of Congress. You can do it all online, yeah.
And what if you have a revision of your book? Do you have to then send it to the Library of Congress saying, I've revised it, or no?
To my understanding, no, because the sort of, the bones of it, the story of it is there and it's yours and it's copyrighted. So if you're making minor changes here and there, I don't think it's necessary that you have to do that. I could be wrong, but...
And now, do you have a physical copy of the book?
I do, yeah.
So then KDP also, you can print it out and have them made?
Yeah,
oh,
it's
wow.
sort of, if you buy it on Amazon, they'll sort of print as it goes, print on demand. So that's pretty cool.
And so with the colors that, I'm sorry, his name was Andy?
Yeah, Andy Park.
Andy Park. The color scheme that he did, you can select that for the cover and have it printed out in those color schemes?
Yeah, the cover that he made, like that's all part of the book package, so even if you have it electronically, it has that cover, it has it all. So when it's printed out, it's that book that you designed and put in there, printed out, as a real copy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you plan to sell it anywhere else or just keep it on Amazon?
I mean, for now, I'm just keeping it on Amazon. I've gone to local bookstores and been like, hey, you want to sell this self-published novel? A lot of them won't do that, which is interesting. But, just boots on the ground, seeing if I can, get copies into stores.
Have you thought about actually selling it yourself from your website or having a website for it?
No, I haven't. I mean, it feels like that might be redundant to having it on Amazon because there's such a bigger reach, and if I tried to put it on my own thing or start that, I'd really be starting from scratch.
Right. So you've actually walked into local bookstores in the LA area with a copy in your hand?
A couple of small horror bookstores, yeah, I've reached out. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, kudos for trying. That's
all you can do.
Adam, for your book Circus on KDP, are you able to track the analytics?
Yeah, they have a really robust system that shows you where the book has been sold in terms of like locations, territories worldwide, because you can set that up if you want it, US only, if you want it, in the other, worldwide KDP stores, you can totally do that. And yeah, like it shows you, your monthly purchases and downloads. If it's electronically, you can track all that. You can put together like different marketing promotions, to push it out. Like you can make it free for a week electronically to try to like bump it up. So they offer a lot of good opportunities to help you like reach a bigger audience.
And are you able to see the demographics of who clicks on your link, who might be interested in it?
You may be able to. I have not found that. I don't know if they get that in depth in terms of demographics.
Do you know who your quote ideal reader is?
I mean, I've set it out as like it's a potentially a young adult/adult horror novel, just based of like one of the main characters is in high school. So I think that it's a young adult thing. I will say that my my nephew, who's around like 10 or 11, read it. And I was like, I don't know if this is, because it's kind of gory, but he read it because I gifted, him and his family a copy. And he loved it. So I'm like, all right, it's working.
Are you able to translate the book into different languages, and have you done that?
I think you can, and I have not yet.
Not yet?
Yeah,
okay.
Not yet.
All right. So if someone in another country wanted your book, you would have that ability to easily have it translated, or are you paying for another translator? Is there an AI that will do it? Or?
That's a good question. I've yet to look into that. I might have to pay for it. But the other thing that you can do is you can do an audiobook version of it, which would be great. Hopefully I can make that happen at some point, because, you just have somebody do the voice and read it through it and get an audiobook version of that. Like, that would be rad.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Or you could read it.
I could, yeah.
You could play all the parts.
I could, yeah, why not?
Are you hoping to do another book?
I think so. I think a follow-up to Circus would be cool. If there is an idea that I think should be a novel, I will probably go that route. But most of the stuff I've been doing has been, feature length, 90-page screenplay sort of thing. So I think it'll take the right idea for me to sort of, venture into the novel again.
Do you think watching film and television can hurt your writing?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if it can. I think it maybe can only help. I think it helps me. I don't think one can watch too much. But again, I'm coming from it not just as a writer, but as a writer and director. So I think about things visually all the time. So I think, watching, I guess, the right type of stories is good. Not to say that like reality TV or trash TV, is good or bad or has a place or doesn't, because you can pick up ideas from that. I think sort of you can pick up ideas from anything. So I don't think it can be a bad thing. I think you should probably supplement that with reading as well. Reading novels, even if you're not writing novels, fiction and nonfiction, and definitely reading screenplays. I think if you do all that, it'll be a good balance.
How do you keep yourself motivated while the film industry is in flux?
I think I just keep being optimistic. It is in flux, but what keeps me going is that I don't think that people are ever going to want to stop watching films or TV shows. People talk about the death of the theater. I don't believe that, frankly. I think, there will probably be a contraction because people can watch on very large screens at home. But the experience of going to a theater, I don't think human beings, no matter what sort of like TikTok brain they have or whatever, I don't think that they're ever going to get really sick of that because of the power of cinema. I'm a huge believer in that. And what I think is very interesting is that, recently it's come out that the most popular shows on like Netflix and other streaming shows are sitcoms, from the 90s and other serialized shows, like Suits and Seinfeld and shows like that. Like those are the most popular now because people want to be able to jump into something, that's a week by week thing that you can jump into any episode and watch it rather than, I got to start at the beginning and follow this story. I think people might be a little burned out by that now, but I think it's really interesting that, the sort of sitcoms, the stuff that was working back in the 90s are still in vogue. And, young people are getting into Seinfeld and Everybody Loves Raymond, it's like, those worked. And we kind of went away from that, like the 22 episode, TV shows, like I wish some of these shows were like more than 10 episodes because like I want more. I want to spend more time with these characters. So that is what keeps me going. It's going, okay, like maybe the foretelling of like social media and like, oh, people only want 6-second videos, like, and that's it, and movies are dead. Like maybe that was overstated because people just want great stories at whatever length, whether it's 2 hours or 90 minutes or 30-minute episodes. Like, I think that is just evergreen and will continue. So that's the stuff that I want to watch and that I want to make. So that's why I sort of keep doing it and keep being optimistic in, a contracting industry and a changing industry, which is tough for all, but, I still got the passion for it. So a lot of people do.
Does anyone ever say, well, that's a rose-colored glasses, Pollyanna mindset. It's going away. No one wants to see. There's no good movies right now.
I mean, yeah, maybe. But that's just not my mindset, Like the world that I want to live in, I'm sort of living in. I'm seeing movies a lot in theaters. I'm digging that. I mean, like, you go to like the AMCs and the other theater chains, like the concession business is huge. They're making these concession cups and buckets that are selling out. Like for Wicked, yeah. Like we saw a movie last night and like the buckets were like, oh, that's super cool. It's a pink bucket. It's a green bucket. Like, I don't know. There's just like so much joy in it that like people can say that. But I think they're just being negative because, like people love film and they love the film going experience.
Yeah, and there's something, I mean, we've loved the communal viewing of whether it's plays, a jousting match, whatever, since the beginning of time. Yeah. So I think it's just in our DNA.
It absolutely is. Yeah, I don't see that ever changing. I mean, to a crazy degree, like we're not all sitting around watching jousts now. Like we're watching movies.
Just for you. Maybe you're not. I am.
Maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's always going to be there in some form or another.